AC Milan against Tottenham Hotspur. James, I'm coming to you first here. It wasn't great news, obviously, for Bentancur recently. Conte obviously back, but not a great performance from Tottenham Hotspur ahead of this game against AC Milan, who themselves are also not in great form, even though they did win on Friday.
Yeah, really woeful performance by Tottenham, losing to a Leicester team that are, mid-table at best in the Premier League, and it's not got better. As you mentioned there, Rodrigo Bentancur, he's out for the season. And we should say, for people that don't watch Tottenham regularly, you don't understand how important Rodrigo Bentancur is. He's the link man between that deadly front three and the rest of the team. He's defensively solid, but he's so elegant in his passing. He is vital. Yves Bissouma has also undergone surgery. Pierre-Emile Højbjerg is suspended for this game. So the likelihood is that Antonio Conte is going to name a starting midfield of Oliver Skipp, who's 22, and a reasonable young prospect, nothing amazing, and Pape Sarr, who's 20, and has had some good moments off the bench. But I think that really gives you some sense of the difficulties Tottenham are going to have. They just need to sort of get through this game, bypass midfield. I mean, let's not forget as well, their goalkeeper, Hugo Lloris, is out injured, and Fraser Forster did hardly look like an adequate replacement. Ryan Sessegnon as well. That's just a bit of a loss of depth. Ivan Perisic is going to have to play, I think, for the next 6 weeks as the sole starting left wing back. Pedro Porro is only settling in. So, I mean, thank God they've got Harry Kane, because and Son is maybe starting to round into like a less bad version of himself than he's been. But like, this looks really tough, like a really bad moment for Spurs to be going to Italy.
Is there a sense that this could be sort of the backs against the wall scenario that Antonio Conte needs to sort of redevelop, a bit of the togetherness in the Spurs squad? Because obviously there's been extenuating circumstances as well. He's been away from the players up until recently. Obviously he was in hospital and had to undergo a little bit of time off. But is there a sense that this could be, especially going up against an opponent that Conte is very familiar with, that this could be the moment to perhaps, galvanize the squad a little bit and, at least try and salvage something from between now and the end of the season and potentially go on, maybe not a deep run in Europe, but at least get to the next round of the Champions League?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And the sort of relevant argument in favour of Spurs is that they're a team that do like playing like that, and they have a manager that relishes those opportunities and coaching staff, clearly, because they did it without Conte in beating Man City. Yes, I mean, like the centre-backs in particular, Romero is someone that really suits that aggressive, energetic, fighting approach. But and if I'm making arguments in favour, if you can just get the ball up to Harry Kane and Kulusevski, they can create for themselves. That's kind of maybe how you view it. And they're a team that are well suited to playing on the counter-attack, although that's actually not how they beat City. But look, we're looking at the stats here. If he gets out of this round, Antonio Conte, it's his best achievement in the Champions League in a decade. And I think maybe there's something about this competition that doesn't quite suit him. He's going to have to adapt a little bit to coaching on the fly. And obviously, it's a really challenging circumstances to be doing that. So, yeah, I keep coming back to the idea that even a few weeks ago, it felt like the timing was quite good for Tottenham because Milan were falling apart. And obviously, they beat Torino slightly underwhelming fashion in midweek or on Friday, whenever it was.
Yep.
But it all feels like it's gone a little bit pear-shaped. And I feel like their season's really at risk of petering out into the same old thing there. I don't think they're going to qualify for the Champions League again. I don't think they've got much chance of doing anything beyond sneaking past Milan. So, injuries have really spoilt this team that I thought might have made a little bit of impact in the competition as a whole.
Yeah, it's well said there, James, as well. I mean, realistically, injuries play a big part in this. This is an unusual year for the Champions League, in particular with it coming off the back of a World Cup. What the players are being asked to do right now is ridiculous, realistically. I mean, I can put myself back on the pitch and think, how many games did I actually go without having an injury? And I struggled in my career. I would go 20 games, hamstring. I would get a lot of injuries just by playing overload on my body. I can't even begin to imagine some of the games that are being played now for these guys. You're playing literally a game every 3 days right now. You're not really spending much time on the training ground. You're not getting much time for rest and recovery. You're being asked to go game. And if there's injuries in your squad, like you pointed out there, James, the best players and the big players are not getting any rest, if any at all. JJ, is that what we're seeing from AC Milan? Because obviously they have been pretty poor. As James pointed out, they did get that win against Torino, 1-0. Giroud, lovely goal, by the way, on Friday. But that broke a run of 7 games without a win in all competitions. They've been dreadful, and I mean dreadful, to watch in 2023. We're hearing issues with Leao's contract. We're hearing issues behind the scenes. Zlatan is back. He's on the bench. He's also 41 years old now. I mean, this is not a good position for Milan to be in when you're coming up against, and I get it, as James pointed out there, it's a wounded Spurs, but I still believe that Spurs would be a favourite in this tie.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we have to recognize that Milan did very well in winning the title last season, but there's also been this sort of element of, these players sort of clutching at being evergreen, the likes of Giroud, the likes of Zlatan, the likes of Simon Kjaer. I mean, it feels like Zlatan has been like on this kind of countdown to suffering from physical problems since he left from PSG, because the reason that he was allowed to move on was because they started to be concerned that he was becoming a bit too injury prone. Obviously, he's extended that career massively since, but it just feels like we're prolonging the inevitable all the time by, constantly talking about Zlatan as if he's still really the talisman of this team. And perhaps that is why the Leao situation is just so critical for Milan now. Milan have to start thinking about the future, not about the now. They have to be, concentrated on the younger, better elements of the team. And they've done well with that in tying Benassa down to an extended contract recently. But for me, Milan are in need of an overhaul, quite a substantial overhaul in the summer, where they move away from some of these veteran presences, and start going for players who are, have not yet hit their prime and, perhaps are more potential based, which is funny given,
that's what they have when you look across the team in midfield. I mean, other than Giroud, and I think it's a really nice balance, isn't it, between a veteran striker, and Ibra is basically going to be Giroud's backup. And then you look back at the back end of this team, it's a young defense. I mean, Leao, you're right that having that young forward, dynamic, irreplaceable forward like Leao, losing him would be a huge blow. But I mean, the whole philosophy of Milan is built around getting these young players.
But then the goals also are expected to come from those guys who have a combined age of nearly 100. I think really that front line, it either needs Leao to sort of be given that guarantee, like, right, you are the guy moving forward. And that money that's spent on the likes of Zlatan and Giroud goes towards keeping Leao, or Milan need to pay a bit more attention, in how that attacking unit is built, because at the end of the day, goals are what win you games, and there's, a sort of decreasing amount of those now coming from certainly from the likes of Zlatan, who's been out for ages and ages, and it just feels like perhaps, they're sort of in that transformation process. And, James is right. It's perhaps, a bit ignorant to dismiss Milan as like a geriatric team, because they're not. They're so much more than just the likes of Zlatan, Giroud and Kjaer, but it feels like the moment is there for them to move on from some of those guys, because let's face it, they're not going to be on, some of the lowest wages in the squad. Milan can perhaps better assign that elsewhere and become more competitive, moving forward with some dynamic players to match some of the talents that they have in other areas like the midfield.
Yeah, well said. And I think right now, for any Milan fan who's out there, I can tell you this because I watch a lot of the Milan games. Milan fans are very unhappy with what is happening right now. Performance-wise, just very difficult to watch. Lack of consistency. Pioli trying to figure out what's going on. And I've been reading that Pioli's been spending a lot of time getting his players out on the training ground, sometimes keeping them for the whole day at the training facility, trying to get them back into the mentality of winning games. But it's very difficult. You're running the risk right there. And I think when the players are not responding like they are not right now, good luck, because in the Champions League, if they do get knocked out, I think realistically what we've said for all the teams to get to this point, it's a job well done. You're in the knockouts of the Champions League, but there are a lot of heads that will roll from teams that get knocked out of the Champions League at this stage, and I can't wait to see.